views presented in this program are not meant to express the specific views of the Lafayette Bible Fellowship. You are listening to the Vigilance Radio Network.
Hello, there we are. Welcome. Welcome back to the Culture In Sanity podcast. This is episode number 2 of season 4. So, if you were eagerly awaiting 2 weeks ago, the Saturday before last, for episode 2, you didn't get it. And that's because I was diagnosed positive with coronavirus. Fake coronavirus. It was a false positive, as it turns out. Almost jeopardized my entire vacation, as I was just talking to Pastor Monty about. But got tested positive, made no sense, no symptoms, never around anybody. Tested again the next day, negative. Okay, what do you do with that? You know, is it false negative or false positive? So it kind of carried on as I was going to. Then, as I was just telling Pastor Monty, was met in Hawaii not with a lay, but with another COVID test. So that one turned out to be negative, which confirmed the false positive. So anyways, that's why we didn't have an episode 2 weeks ago. So today is episode 2 of season 4. So thank you for coming back and eagerly awaiting the return. So on the docket for today is more fun. And by fun, I don't mean necessarily fun. I mean more nonsense. I mean more nonsense.
You know, a lot has happened in 2 weeks, let me tell you.
Yeah, a lot tends to. A lot tends to in culture. But so what we got on the docket for today, Pastor, as I sort of briefed you on, was we got the deep fake trend continuing and developing rapidly. So more on that. We got, how would you categorize issues with children's, not consumables, I don't know, things marketed to kids. We got Mr. Potato Head in the news. We got Dr. Seuss in the news.
Well, cancel culture. I mean, it's all part of cancel culture.
Right. So we got, but specifically as it relates to things marketed toward children and how we should feel about them now, things that are changing and whatnot. So that's what's on the docket today. So we're going to just sort of jump right in. We'll start with the whole deep fake thing. So did you happen to read that article that I posted, the Tom Cruise one?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So
the guy looks like Tom Cruise.
Yeah. So our producer Jasmine can share it. But this particular TikTok profile, I don't know. It's weird to refer to him as like this guy or girl. Honestly, don't know if it's a guy or girl because the whole concept of deepfake means it can be anyone. But it's specifically this person deepfaking Tom Cruise, and there's a few videos. But I'll sort of play the audio for you because it's kind of disturbing. But and then we'll sort of discuss the implications of deepfake. But it's a TikTok guy, and he deepfakes Tom Cruise. And, okay, before I start, like a year ago, so deepfake is a relatively new thing, right? I think we talked about it on last season's, one of last season's episodes, in like the, just sort of an introduction to the deepfaking and stuff like that. But a year ago, if you were to like look at deepfake videos and stuff, you would see like clear glitches, I guess, and stuff. Like when someone moved, like the face, the graphics and stuff would sort of shift and glitch, and it would be like obviously a fake video, right?
Right.
Like someone like this thing that someone's doing. It's kind of like if you go, you don't, but you know, you go on Instagram or you can even do it on Facebook Messenger. Like if you Skype someone, or not Skype, but Facebook message video call someone, there's like these filters you can do, and there's like an overlay, right? A face. And it's obvious that it's like an overlay.
Right.
That's what deepfake looked like a year ago. It was like this overlay that looked so obvious that it was fake, but you're like, oh, wow, that's kind of disturbing. And then several months later, like I was exposed to like this Jordan Peterson one where it was just audio though, and I don't know if it was like someone had taken snippets of his many interviews and conversations he's had and like seamlessly stitched them together to create a Jordan Peterson like voice emulator. Like I can speak and it's not my voice, it's his voice. So the technology has been like rapidly evolving, and now we're at this point where there's these videos, and this particular guy, it's Tom Cruise, but there's these videos where it's like, oh my gosh, that's disturbing. Like, you can buy it hook, line, and sinker that is not who he says he is. He's Tom Cruise. So I'm going to play just a quick audio for you. Our producer can post via the link that I'm pulling from the video, or you can look it up yourself. Just Google search deepfake Tom Cruise, and I'm sure you'll find it in recent articles and stuff. But it's crazy. So I'm gonna just play the audio for you.
I'm gonna show you some magic. It's the real thing.
Sounds like Tom Cruise.
I mean, it's all the real thing.
So, of course, that was just the audio. And if you're listening, would you agree that that sounded like Tom Cruise?
Yeah, reasonably so. But you know what comes immediately to my mind?
What?
You know, the guy has done like 4 or 5 Mission Impossible deals. That's what they do. They put a mask on and a voice thing, and they can change into anybody.
That's actually some good meta commentary there. But so the audio is one thing, right? It's people have been like emulating and impersonating voices forever, right? That's a thing. So the real like magic in the deep fake is if you watch the video. So look it up. Jasmine will post the thing on our comments, but it's disturbing, and it looks like Tom Cruise and like everything. There's no glitching, there's no shifting. It's seamless, and it's like, whoa, this is how far it's come in just a year. So, first of all, I'll give you initial thoughts on this whole deepfake thing, and I'll ask you some more pointed questions. What is your take on the whole deepfake thing? Is it kind of disturbing for you? Do you think
Not really.
Do you think it will lead somewhere that's like disturbing? I guess.
Well, it can. I mean, there's potential if the art form,
the art form of deepfaking.
if the art form is protected, perfected rather, then you'll never be able to be sure who is presenting what and if it's really true.
Yeah,
that has scary implications.
Yeah, and that's already sort of where we find ourselves with news, right?
Right.
I was talking to one of the other elders. I was talking to Colin this morning. And we already live in like a time, right, when it's what do you trust? Where do you go for like real information, for the facts versus manipulated, distorted things, and narratives and so on and so forth. So we already live in a time where like what's real and what's fake, right? And video, audio, not so much to an extent, but video in particular used to be like, that's cold hard proof, right? Like you're in a courtroom and you're caught on video doing something, have fun wiggling your way out of it type of thing, you know? Like video was this thing that was as factual as it gets in terms of proof, right?
Well, yeah, I mean,
but nowadays
in the court system, though, see, but in the court system, they have forensic investigators that can tell whether something has been manipulated or not, media-wise.
Well, that's what it's saying is it still hasn't been this article. Again, read the article, but not you, but our audience. But one of the things it's saying in the article is social media hasn't developed systems and formulas to flag these videos as authentic or fake.
Right. Well, they would have to develop software to do that.
Right, and it's like an ongoing thing of how can we do that? How does it work? Like Microsoft is on is sort of trying to lead the charge in how to, sell this solution to that problem. But Well, like I said, I mean, I hear what you're saying. Like there was forensic investigators that would look into that and stuff, but for the everyday person, right? And if we're talking like culturally impactful, right? Not necessarily in a courtroom,
Right.
but for the everyday person who's being presented with a fact, or look, here's this person saying something, or it was even used against like Nancy Pelosi, for example. There was a deep fake of her like acting drunk. That wasn't real. That was a deep fake of her, acting intoxicated or something like that.
Right.
So it already like has seeped its way into like the political realm on some level, although it was used humorously. But you can see how, well, we're not even a full step away from now introducing this into a more insidious and sinister, with more insidious and sinister like agendas. You know what I mean? But yeah, like Microsoft is trying to develop something so that like the social media platforms have a way of flagging these videos, because for the everyday person with the naked eye, like there's no flagging it. Like that just looks real,
Right.
Other than saying, okay, why would Tom Cruise post this nonsense video? Like that's the only sort of recourse we have. Like, has Tom Cruise lost his mind, kind of thing. But we don't really know. But I don't know. You don't think that if someone can use something for bad, they won't use it for bad? And in this case, deepfakes. You said you're not necessarily worried about it, but
Well, but I'm not worried about it because I'm old.
so you don't have to worry about
And
it.
I don't have to worry. First
Okay.
of all, what your audience may not know is that, I mean, I spent 15 years as an investigator for the Internal Revenue. And so I'm skeptical anyway. when people tell me things, I'm skeptical. I'm not. I'm not what we used to call gullible. I'm not gullible.
People have been feeding you lines for decades.
Yeah, and so I don't easily get faked out. But that being said, there's a lot of the stuff that's happening in the culture today really doesn't apply to me. Personally.
Okay, so put yourself in a younger person's shoes then.
Well, from that standpoint, as I said, that's really difficult then, because what you have is an erosion of trust, and you're just not going to know who to trust, and the potential for wreaking havoc on an individual's life is just enormous.
Yeah.
And I don't know why people want to do that type of stuff anyway. But remember that the biblical perspective is that man is inherently given into sin and to glorify self because of the fall. So people who are bent towards that end, they will do those things.
That reminds me. Okay, two things. When I was in Hawaii, I found that Hawaiians seem to like country music. Like I found it playing in like grocery stores and markets and stuff
I'm telling you,
more often than I would have expected.
country is everywhere.
It was weird, but while I was in one of their like local grocery store chains, can't remember the name of it, but there was a Luke Bryan song on, so you'll appreciate this as a country fan. And I don't know the name of his song, but it's like the one where he's saying, I believe most people are good, and yada, 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 yada. And that's like the reoccurring like theme of the song. I believe most people are good.
Yeah.
What?
I think Luke Bryan is delusional.
Most people aren't good.
I don't believe most people are good.
I don't either. I was saying that to Josh. I was like, this song sucks. Most people aren't good.
Yeah,
Like, what's Luke Bryan smoking? Most people suck.
But that's what the world, the world pushes that idea that they don't want to, admit that deep in the heart of man reeks a predisposition towards evil.
Yeah, and at best, if most people act good, whatever that means, right?
Yeah.
If most people act good toward you or have this good consensus toward humanity, act good toward humanity consensus, chances are they don't really have a reason to.
My wife always says this, if somebody's flattering you and sucking up to you, beware.
Yeah. Like, if most people are good and have this, again, good consensus, their worldview probably doesn't support it. And if you ask them why, 100 times, they'll eventually get backed into a corner of, well, I don't really know why.
Yeah.
I don't really know why I'm supposed to do this. I was told to, and I guess I'm just living that out. So what will it take to break you then? You
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
anyways, but okay, so along with the whole deepfake things, it's starting to creep into like historical record. So now they've figured out a way to like animate century-old photos, even like, and take a picture of your great grandma who was born in, well, for you it would be what year?
Could be Ireland, Scotland.
No, not where, when.
My great grandma.
18
Wow, we're going back to the
1830.
1800s. Yeah, we're going back into the 1800s there.
They could take a picture of your great grandma, you know, kind of like brown and beige colored photo, or black and white,
Right,
or
right,
whatever.
right. Faded black and white.
Yeah, yeah, faded black and white, and they can animate it. They can turn your great grandma. They can make her nod and have a little smirk, blink a couple times, to the point where it's like, whoa, great grandma just sort of came to life, and I never knew her in life.
Yeah.
And so it's like seeping into like historical records and stuff, and that has its implications too if that continues to go that way and be used in a bad way or whatever. How do we start changing history, like not just censoring history?
Well, you know, now
actively changing.
Well, you know, now, see, but
things,
I
pictures.
I can see a commercial thing for that, because you know, like now you can send off pictures to like a website where they put your photographs on like a really nice glass thing,
Okay.
and make a plaque like a glass, and you know, imagine if you could bury into that the technology to have like a picture of grandma nod her head or appear to turn and wink at you
That's disturbing. Don't say
and hang. Yeah.
that. I don't like it. Okay, so let me ask you this. This is maybe a stretch for you, given your position on the topic, but so I heard someone talking about, he was actually a professor at like Vanderbilt or something like that. I heard him talking about how he thinks this technology can like awaken museums, because they can make things now be more engaging with this kind of technology.
Yeah, kind of like what I just alluded to.
Yeah. Yeah, yours was creepy. But how it can make like history come to life and be more engaging and attract a new audience to history and stuff like that.
Sure.
So, with that said, and with that as a sort of backdrop for this question, do you think that deepfake technology can be used in ways that attract a new audience, quote unquote, to God, to a relationship with God? Do you think deepfake technology can sort of have an impact in that realm as well? And I don't really know how it would do that, so I'm asking. I don't have formulated thoughts myself. But if we're talking about history, then, you know, history can expand to all realms of life, right? Excuse me. So do you think that deepfake technology, like, can you think of any ways in which deepfake, off the top of your head, technology can be used in a way that glorifies God or brings people to God or awakens someone's, excuse me, curiosity in God and the history of the Bible and things like this? What do you think?
Well, on the far side, I remember the Apostle Paul says that, you know, as long as the message is geared towards a summary of what he alludes to in a couple of places, as long as the message is geared towards bringing Christ glory, he's okay with it. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's possible. I think the person that you would really need in here to discuss the creative end of how it might be used
and I'm not a creative,
is Pastor Josh.
And I'm not a creative person.
He's the real creative. I'm more of an optimistic pragmatist, so I just kind of take things as they come, you know, and try to look at the positive. But could it possibly used in such a? It's possible. I think the problem would be is that, you know, with Scripture, we are involved with truth. and by the very nature of deep fake, it is deception. And so there would be
So you think there's a fine line there? Be careful.
Yeah.
Sort of
Oh,
discern-
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I do like the idea of walking into the museum and seeing like a deal of Marilyn Monroe where you pass it and she goes, "Hi there." You know, there's just
We were talking about scripture, and then we jumped to Marilyn Monroe. So your mind. No, it's like one of the things that Vanderbilt professor. First of all, real quick, Joe says it's scary on our comments here. Joe says it's scary. I had to explain to an older person that Obama didn't give Harvey Weinstein a Presidential Medal of Freedom, and she presented the worst photoshopped picture I've ever seen. People are especially gullible to new media manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
Yeah.
And in a world where we're just doing this on our phones, you know,
And
quickly consuming.
And what Joe is stating is true. The danger is then how will you know what is truth and what is not?
Yeah. What I was gonna say was, and you're a church history guy, is that it can almost present like a new age of like iconography if it dips into that realm, like if the deepfake technology is used by maybe biblical historians or something like that, it can then be like incorporated into people's religious practice and stuff like that with the use of deepfake technology. So I don't know, it's interesting to think about, and it's weird, and the sinful man will inevitably take it to a sinful place, I think. Like if it's there to be used in a bad way, chances are we're going to see it used in a bad way. You know, someone's going to be misrepresented by use of deepfake, or I don't know. It's a crazy world.
What I can see in the future developing out of something like that is that what the scripture talks about is the fact that the end times, as we come closer and closer to the advent of Christ and him removing his church, in the end times, there will be many that will have a form of religiosity, but they will not be true. They will not be actual disciples of Christ. They'll just have the appearance. And I can see from a religious standpoint many people being won over to a fake church, a fake Jesus, as it were, under these circumstances. So as a matter of, because as I said earlier, the difficulty is the gospel of Christ represents truth, but deepfake represents deception. And so I can see Satan using that as a tool in order to pull people away from Christ.
Joe asks, will deepfake be used to keep actors' likeness in new roles after they've passed? Kind of reminds me of like how it's to a lesser extent because it's not as real looking, but like holograms used in like concerts and stuff. Like
didn't they do a Michael Jackson thing where he was doing? Yeah.
And he cites specifically like Star Wars characters, how in movies and just a couple years old, it's not deep fake necessarily, but it's like the use of animation and motion capture to make it seem like, oh, that's a young Carrie Fisher that we're seeing on screen, or
as I said, there's lots of potential for this. I mean, I can see it being used as a tool in bereavement. Lots of people they use taxidermy as a way to preserve a dog or something special to them. Imagine in bereavement, if your husband or your wife, you love them, you can't part from them, and you have a deep fake likeness of them that now you can refer to.
It's almost like you have a maybe not physical touch, although who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows in the future? But it's almost like if you can get someone to like surrogate your dead spouse through use of deepfake, you can still have an emotional relationship with them.
Yeah.
Whoa. There's some science fiction stuff going on here.
Yeah, it's I can see lots of things.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay. Josh said real quick before we move on, Actors are now protecting their post-mortem image for that reason. William Shatner, in particular, comes to mind in pioneering that practice.
Oh yeah.
Something having to do with like his physical body, right? He's like wrote, and I don't know exactly. Josh isn't here, but I think I've heard him talk about that before. Where like when he dies, he wants his physical body frozen,
Preserved
basically.
somehow?
Preserved.
Well, there
Yeah.
are people that apply cryotechnology to
Yeah.
the idea that they can be brought back.
He says in Revelation, they worship the image of the beast who was itself animated.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. I'm gonna close out of this. Move on to our next topic. Mr. Potato Head. All the great things that we should be talking about culturally, and Mr. Potato Head was one of the big ones in the news in the last couple weeks while I was vacationing in beautiful Hawaii. So the brand, in case you haven't been following, the brand of Mr. Potato Head has dropped its Mr. from the branding of it.
Right.
So when you go buy a formerly known as Mr. Potato Head, you're not buying Mr. Potato Head anymore. You're buying just Potato Head. Let me be clear, as they made clear, Hasbro, the toy maker, it's not that you can't buy a version of Potato Head that's Mr. Just the fact that you have to dance around the language of this already annoys me, but it's not that you can't buy a version of Potato Head that's Mr., also known as a Mr. Potato Head, but that as its overarching branding, it won't be called Mr. Potato Head anymore. It's not that you can't buy a version of Mrs. Potato Head, it's just not going to be called as an umbrella branded term, Mr. Potato Head. So, what in the hell is what I have to say to start. But one of the statements by Hasbro says, by offering a toy that exists outside of the binary of male and female, Hasbro is helping kids to simply see toys as toys, which encourages them to be their authentic selves, whatever that means, outside of the pressures of traditional gender norms. So, my first question to you is it as simple as that, as they would suggest? Is it as simple as Hasbro is just trying to help kids see toys as toys, encouraging them to be their authentic selves?
It's never as simple as that. I mean, first of all, what they're doing is basically virtue signaling. So, they're trying to, from a marketing standpoint, accommodate the changes that we see taking place within the culture in which surrounds us. So, basically, that's virtue signaling, and it's neither here nor there. For me, it's not a big deal. I would be more concerned. First of all, I don't consider Mr. Potato Head a really great toy to begin with.
Terrible articulation.
Okay, because really the central issue is that in order to change from a Mr. Potato Head to a Mrs. Potato Head, you basically change the headdress, you change the hat,
The lips too,
and the lips,
eyes.
But there's no penis or vulva there, so you can't. And
You heard it here.
I would, if they were really concerned about helping children understand the dynamics of things, then they should create some type of interchangeable genitals for.
No, that's the whole point. They don't want to.
Well, no, because then
isolate.
you can get into helping teach about sexual identity in so many different ways.
But having just two genitals is
I said interchangeable.
yeah, but that would suggest that there are only two genders. There are only two ways to sexually identify, and that's the whole point.
Oh no, there's many more ways to sexually identify.
Right, but if
It's
you
just-
introduce genitals, you would be saying you identify as either this way or that way, Pastor, and that's their whole point, right? they are not trying to lock
Like
people in.
no, they're from a marketing standpoint, they are being, as I said, they're just trying to identify a product wise their neutrality. But the reality of it is if they really want to jump in, then they should do as I suggest.
So, of course, this decision, this decision has its fair share of supporters and its fair share of outragers, I guess.
Yeah, haters.
Yeah. So.
And there's a fair share of people that are in the neutral spot as well. I could care less.
Well, I appreciate your use of the word neutral, given the subject matter. But one outrager commented or tweeted, "People worry about the strangest things, and it's the absolute minority who wreck it for the majority. Some really sad people out there. The fear of upsetting one or two, usually idiots, overwhelms society, and we really need to stop pandering and live a little." So he's talking about he's referring to the fact that Hasbro thought they had to change this in fear of upsetting a statistical minority of people.
Oh, minute, yeah.
But do you think that there's any sort of precedent that we should be alarmed with in this kind of thing? I mean, you've talked about before. Excuse me, I have a terrible thing in my throat this episode. But you've talked about before the aggressive agenda toward children has been happening for 30 years or more, right?
Right. They're targeted most
because
definitely.
that's how you win the culture.
Yes.
You don't target the Pastor Montes.
Right.
You target the Pastor Montes' grandkids.
Right. Exactly.
You target, their kids in the future.
Right.
But do you think what sort of precedent is being set with this sort of decision by Hasbro as it seeks to utterly blur the lines of something like gender?
I think that...
I mean, you saw this a few years... Sorry to quickly interrupt. You saw this a few years back. I think Target was saying, and I can't remember if this is a thing still. I guess I haven't really paid attention or go to Target enough, but they were going to drop the boys' toy section and the girls' toy section, maybe even drop the boys' clothing area. And, how you see the signs in a store like that. You see men, women. You see the girls' toy section, and you see it because it's a wave of pink that all of a sudden hits, right? So it's not necessarily a new thing, but it's just another thing toward that agenda. So
I think the larger issue that we're looking at here is that the founders of the Constitution were concerned that what could destroy the republic. So we live in a constitutional republic, and that their concern was what could destroy it. Our country was government taking over and interfering with certain elements. For example, that's the reason why we have the First Amendment, freedom of speech. That's the reason why we have the Second Amendment, being able to have weapons. And there are a couple other amendments that apply to that. So their fear was that government would be the one that would take over, and so that's the reason why those things were put in the Constitution. Interesting, the danger has not been that the government is going to be doing these things, although it does attempt to an extent to do that, another subject, but it is actually big business which is a driving force towards determining what is allowable or not allowable within culture and trying to change culture to match their vision of what society should look like. That's the virtue signaling of Hasbro, for example. But the big Amazon, and we'll maybe get into that when we talk about Dr. Suess and what have you. But Amazon and your large corporations, Instagram and Facebook, and all these are the ones, big business, are the ones that that we have to be careful about, and that's what's happening.
Yeah, I saw this term attached to this article at some point. Maybe it was in the comments or something, but it's the term hypervigilance, and hypervigilance, not in the way that we would perhaps use the term hypervigilance regarding, you know, our faith and our worldview and, you know, how we live our lives, but hypervigilance in regards to how the culture uses it. So the culture, this is an example of the culture being hypervigilant so that it is sensitive to not offend, sensitive to be more inclusive, you know, sensitive to all these things. So they're being hypervigilant when they make a move like this to, you know, as you said, pander to whatever the culture wants, essentially, or whatever the culture is at the time deeming good or right or moral, and that's a, you know, a shifting sand, as we know. But what are the dangers of this kind of hypervigilance in culture, and how does that differ from how we use the term in our ideology and in our worldview?
Well, ultimately, it comes back to the responsibility of the parents.
I agree.
And, you know, the parents, I mean, I have issues
That's where I'll get into it with Dr. Suess.
We never, when our kids were growing, we never bought Potato Head. I don't want my, first of all, because I don't want my kids getting the idea that they can, you know, that it's okay to play with food.
Wow, I'm surprised you didn't opt with that you can take your body parts and put them in your butt, as you do, you do with a potato head.
Wow, no, you know, so when they get a baked potato on their plate, is there going to be a desire to play with that potato because they have a potato head? You know, I just didn't. I never saw the point of the toy, personally.
Okay, so back to the question.
Hypervigilance.
Yeah.
Wow. Again, what I see corporate America in particular. Listen, in the old days, in my day, when we first started seeing a lot of this stuff start to take place after World War II and then into the 1960s and what have you, which is more my generation, we were not so concerned with the things that were happening in the world, in the culture around us, and if there were changes taking place, they were very, very underground and secretive in how it is that they were going about those things. Now, in the culture in which you live in today, these large corporations are seeking to change society into what they want it to be, and they are aggressive, openly aggressive about what they want and hostile towards what they don't want. Mm-hmm. And it comes back as a disciple of Christ. My responsibility in dealing with my children and grandchildren is that I don't take for granted anything in regard to what I partake of for myself or my children. We have involved discussions about all of these elements of society. Mm-hmm. And so the hypervigilance really should be on the part of mom and dad.
Yeah. Your son, who is watching, wants you to know that, for the record, he did have a Mr. Potato Head, and he loved it. So you can take that up with him after the show, I suppose.
I have. Let me. And maybe Rose could correct me as well. I don't remember them having a Mr. Potato Head, but I don't really care one way or the other.
You know, topics like this, I guess I appreciate them for tracking what's going on.
Yeah.
In the culture,
right?
So that I can be, as you said, discerning and talk to my own kids about it. But things like this, I just can't help but think, like, and I don't mean to be insensitive or make light of it, but there are people in the world who are living with no clothes or food, who are skinny on their, like, who are really struggling and like it's all they can do to meet their daily needs.
Right.
But in America, in countries like ours, we have enough time and enough to where we can worry about things like this.
Yeah, I know. It's yes, I agree.
It's sad.
It's pathetic.
It's really sad. Like, what are we doing? Okay. I'm going to break for some trivia. We have some trivia cards
Good luck
here
with that.
for our audience, who I'll track the comments of, and for our co-host, Pastor Monty. So, Jasmine, if you would hit it. I'll just ask you a few trivia questions.
Time has played the game.
Cultural trivia pursuit.
Time to play the game.
Because believe it or not, it's hard to find trivia about cancel culture, if that's what you want to call this. The theme of
Because
this
it's a new
episode.
thing.
The theme of this episode.
Yeah, because it's a new thing.
Cancel culture or censorship culture. Although I did try, and I have to share this one. So there's a guy who made a censorship trivia game, and by nature the trivia questions were ridiculous, and that was the point.
Yeah.
Because he was like basically raising the question of where are we at as a culture? This is ridiculous. You know,
Yeah,
the things we're
yeah.
getting offended by. And so I looked up his trivia, and the first question on his censorship trivia pursuit was, what are you more offended by? What are you more offended by? Janet Jackson's nipple, referring to the Super Bowl thing. Michael Jackson's nipple. Michelangelo's nipple, or the statue of David's nipple by
right,
Michelangelo.
Right.
Or your own nipple. What are you more offended by? And so once I found that, I abandoned all my quest to find a censorship trivia game to give you
Yeah.
today. But we have as a fallback here our pop culture trivia pursuit questions. So I'll ask you a few just to break up the monotony of our subject matter. Okay.
Like it's
Out
been,
of curiosity.
like it's been boring up to this point.
Out of curiosity, though, what are you more offended by of those options?
Wow. I was more offended by the penis of David rather than his nipple.
Okay. And we'll leave it at that. And we'll move on before this show completely goes off the rails to where we don't want it to go. All right. So, pop culture question. I encourage you, if you're tuning in, to look online. Also, your wife says she's guilty. She got her kids a Mr. Potato Head.
Okay.
So, I sense
I
a
stand-
future argument.
No argument for me. I stand corrected.
And that she still has it somewhere. So, literally, it's in your house.
Oh, there we go. Let's pull that out and play with that baby.
Okay. You ready?
Sure.
I'm just trying to find a question that's you're going to have a chance in hell at. So bear with me. Okay. Oh, wow. These questions. In what Price is Right game do players drop discs down a vertical board hoping to land them in big money slots? You're old, so you watch Price is Right.
No, I've never watched Price is Right.
But I actually do know this because my grandma used to watch it, and so I know it. But I'll read it again. In what Price is Right game do players drop discs down a vertical board, hoping to land them in big money slots? So it's that one, I'm pretty sure, where it's got all the pegs, right? And your disc hits the pegs, and it's like roulette where it goes. You know the name of that game?
No, I haven't
Made
a clue.
famous by Bob Barker.
No, I haven't a clue.
It's called Plinko.
Plinko.
So if you got
You
Plinko,
know,
and you're, hey, a couple people got Plinko.
Yeah, I should have known that.
Josh and
Yeah,
Heidi both were correct. It's
oh, that's
Plinko.
amazing. Okay.
So they watched.
Well, you
Price
didn't
is
give
Right.
me options.
James
Were there
says
options?
No, it's a trivia game. It's not multiple choice.
Plinko. Wow.
Plinko.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never heard.
Okay, ready for the next one?
Pinko, I've heard of.
Pinko?
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay. What actor did Melanie Griffith? Melanie Griffith, is that the comedian, the redhead actress? Melanie Griffith? I don't know. No, I'm thinking of someone else. What actor did Melanie Griffith move in with at the age of 14 and eventually marry?
Oh,
I'll give you a
wow.
hint.
Wow.
Miami Vice.
Don Johnson.
Correct. Correct.
That's my one gimme for the day.
All right. What talk show host? This was a big guy during my kid in teenage years. What talk show host commonly paints his pinky fingernail black?
Wow. Howard Stern.
No, although I could see that. No. Carson Daly. You know who Carson Daly
I've
is?
never watched Carson Daly.
MTV, TRL.
Yes, it's MTV, so you know.
He hosts other stuff too. I'm pretty sure he hosted like
Yeah.
a music show or some sort of talent show or something once.
I'm very limited in who I approve of as talk show hosts, so.
You're pretty limited in who you approve of in general, to be fair.
What? Yeah. Catch up there, Jasmine.
All right. What harmonica-wielding actor was responsible for The Return of Bruno? Okay, I'll give you a hint.
Did Bruno leave?
I'll give you a hint. Big action star. Big action star in the 80s, 90s, and I guess he's had a resurgence of his... I guess he never really went away as an action star. But for the last 25, 30 years, big action star.
I have no idea. Dwayne Johnson.
No, he's new. He's only burst onto the acting scene in like the early 2000s. Bruce Willis.
Bruce, okay.
All right, last one. Last one for a more younger audience. What movie is 8 Mile... Or what movie? What city is the movie 8 Mile set in? 8 Mile is...
I haven't even watched 8 Miles.
Do you know who it's about?
No.
Eminem? The rapper, you know Eminem?
Yeah, the
Do you know where
white
he's
guy
from?
trying to be black, yeah.
The white guy trying to be black.
Yeah.
Detroit is the answer.
Okay.
He's from Detroit.
Okay.
Set in Detroit.
Cool.
Okay, that was our pop culture trivia. Let's see. We got a couple people who got Plinko, and Joe and Tiffany got Detroit. Josh got communism. What? Communism? Maybe that's a typo.
Pinko. No.
Communism?
I said Pinko. That's the communism.
Oh, gotcha. All right, let's move on. We're getting crazy here. Okay, this probably will take us to the end, I imagine. But the latest, this was what, a few days ago or something?
Yeah, it's been maybe
Again,
a week.
It was while I was vacationing and not worrying about ridiculous things such as this. But in the last few days or week, Dr. Seuss has made the headlines. It was Dr. Seuss's birthday recently.
Yes.
And he made headlines. Why? Because his books are being pulled off of shelves.
Not all
Not
of
all
them.
of them.
Just, yeah, not
select
all.
A select 6
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah.
His books are being pulled for being discriminatory, racially insensitive, hateful is why they're being that's what is being suggested, that they're discriminatory, they're racially insensitive, and because of those they are hateful. But he has several books, 6 of them being pulled and I think they're just no longer sold.
Yeah,
Like
they're no longer available.
They're not going to be available. And to be fair, at least 4 of them I've never even heard of.
For those of you who happen to have these in your library,
Hold on to those.
hold on to those.
Those are probably going to be worth a lot of money.
Yes, they are.
So if you're a collector and you're looking to make some cash,
their value exponentially
honestly,
increased.
I'd be interested in what they'd sell for even right now.
Yeah.
If you were to go online.
Yeah,
You know, like
yeah.
if they already have a value that has shot up.
Yes, I
because they're
agree.
being
They
pulled,
probably have.
let alone in a year or something.
Yeah.
But so he made the headlines because of that, because his content is being deemed as discriminatory and racially insensitive and things like that. So I'll give you your initial thoughts. Specifically, what side it is. Gosh, I forget the name of the book, but there's his books they're caricature-esque, right? I don't know
Yeah.
how to say that.
Yeah.
But in his books, for example, he has like an Asian man in a straw hat, like a cone. You know what I'm
Like
talking
the
about?
type of hats that Asians wear.
Not all of them. Okay.
I've lived in Asia.
But they don't
A
all
lot
wear that.
do.
So let's be
A lot
careful.
do.
Okay, that's fine. If a lot do is fine. But so Asians are wearing hats like that. Asians are, wielding chopsticks.
And you know why they wear
in
hats like
his
that?
books.
You know why they wear hats like that?
I imagine it has to do with the fact that if they're farmers, they're protecting themselves from the sun.
It is hot.
Yeah.
And that's the material that they have to make the hats out of.
So anyways, that's an example of why his books are being pulled. There's for example, Asians are depicted as cone-wearing hats, chopstick-wielding, they look a certain way, have a certain,
They eat with chopsticks.
style, like their
Yeah.
clothing or whatever.
Certain countries they eat with chopsticks.
It's true. So what are your initial thoughts on this whole thing then?
Well, okay.
Initial thoughts.
This is cancel culture. This is basically a group of see. Here's the thing, is that at the root of cancel culture is the idea that I am in power, and I only want what I want because I'm in power, and so I can force other people to do what I want because I'm in power. And again, we don't have government which are doing these things. We have distributors like Amazon and Facebook and Instagram and all these who are making the decision that they are going to tell you what you can or can't read, what you can or can't say, because they are going to dictate what is allowable or not allowable as they seek to shape the culture in which we live in.
My question is this. So I don't know if you grew up reading Dr. Seuss books. I'm not even sure when his first children's books were published.
I've read
so I don't know
some
if you were,
of them.
I don't know if you were young when they were first being published. I know they're old.
My parents didn't give us books to read.
And that's when Jasmine hits the sad sound. There it is.
I was a
so my question is
poor
this.
child.
Why is it that I can grow up reading a Dr. Seuss book? I'm sure our producer Jasmine grew up reading Dr. Seuss book. My kids have Dr. Seuss books in their room. To be fair, they don't have the 6 that are being pulled.
I probably have some in my library. Our kids read Dr. Seuss.
They don't have the 6 that are being pulled, partly because I didn't know they existed. I'd never heard of the titles. I think I heard of 1 or 2 of them.
Right.
So, I grew up with them, read them. I'm a pretty well-rounded guy, I'd like to think,
Yeah.
Or a pretty good guy
Yeah.
by culture standards.
Oh, okay.
So on and so forth. Why can I grow up with those books, consume those books, but today's kid can't? Why is it harmful for today's kid growing up and not harmful for me 25 years ago?
Okay, so you
What's
just from a formatting
where's
standpoint.
the disconnect?
Just from a formatting standpoint, I don't do why questions.
Okay. I think you understand my point. I'm being facetious.
That
in the
being
question.
said, were you listening to what my initial thoughts were?
Of course.
What you do or didn't do as a child is not important. That's canceled out. We are now going to dictate to you what you can and can't say, what you can and can't consume, because we're in power. Deal with it.
So Joe brings up a question, valid, because if I looked at the numbers for these specific titles too, but he asked if there isn't a market for them, can a business not adjust? Meaning, if there are books that aren't selling as well, can they not adjust? Josh says valid question, but another question that this brings up is, does art belong to the artist or the public? So 2 different questions, right? So in my research of this news that's breaking and stuff, it seems like they're focusing less on the numbers of these particular titles. I would understand it. Okay, these books
Sure.
don't sell. We're not going to sell them anymore.
Right. Purely a marketing issue.
Purely marketing. But as I understand it, and if I'm wrong, then forgive me and I'm wrong, but based on what I was reading from several different sources, that's not what's being cited for why they're being pulled. They're not being pulled because of marketing, because of they're not selling. They're being pulled because of what they're portraying.
Right. Fox News' The Five did a segment on this, and Jesse Waters, one of the 5 hosts of The Fives, had each one of the books, and he opened the books, and he pointed to the specific issues that they were taking issue with. and so you look at some of those things and you just go, really? But you see, these people who do this type of thing, first of all, we go back to the issue, they're virtue signaling, but worse than virtue signaling, they're now dictating what you can and can't consume.
Mm-hmm.
And they're taking away from you the freedom of your choice.
Well, here's what's even more. Here's what it also leads to, that dictation, right, of what you can or can't consume, and the freedom of your choice. I was listening and reading another part of the same whatever, but it's now going from that to artists, for example, comedians and writers,
Yes.
and stuff like that. They're self-censoring because
Yes.
of fear of what will or will not be allowed, will or will not be consumed, and how self-censorship is now this new, like, hugely dangerous
Or
thing.
who's
And-
sponsoring them.
and that level of like telling what you can or can't do has now moved into, okay, well, I guess I just won't, like, create that kind of thing in fear of this, in fear of, like,
Yes,
the whole
yes.
censorship. And so
Yeah, or who's sponsoring them? Do you remember about 6 months? Must have been about 6 months ago. Dave Chappelle did a segment, where he basically just he just let it all hang out, and he didn't care.
he doesn't tend to,
He doesn't. Yeah,
to be fair.
yeah, but he just didn't care about cancel culture and about what people liked or didn't. He just put it out there.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a number of comedians that really spoke to the fact that they liked that he did that and that he was brave enough to do so. But they also pointed out that many of them, as comedians, because they want to work, 'cause stand-up comedians, they go to venues where larger corporations are normally present,
Here's
and
what's
they're going to dictate what they can and can't say.
Here's what's interesting about that, and I can't really crack it in terms of why some people can make it on the other side of this cancel culture, is so you have people like Dave Chappelle. There are many others like him, but he's a prominent one, obviously, who, I mean, for as long as I've known him as a comedian, there's nothing off limits. And for this guy, he'll talk about anything. He calls hypocrisy on both sides as he sees it,
Yeah.
so on and so forth. And he'll joke about the worst things you can think of, like vulgar and offensive, and he'll joke about, more high thought type of things. So someone like him, he can talk about these things and whatever, but somehow he makes it on the other side of censorship. But then it seems to me, and this is just observation, it seems to me that people who choose to, like, live under that pressure that the culture puts on them in terms of that kind of thing,
Yeah.
the people that choose to live that way or portray a certain image of themselves, but then you find out, some hidden stuff behind the scenes or whatever.
Yeah.
And okay, now that person's not who they say they were, now let's cancel them or whatever. Those are the people who get canceled, who
Yeah.
are silenced, or you never hear from again, who won't have a future in that business or that industry. But the people who just sort of, here's who I am, I'm not going to apologize for it. Like, I've done these things. This is where I'm coming from. I don't blah, 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 blah. Those people seem to somehow, like, make it on the other side of a cancel culture without being scathed in a way that affects their career or things like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And I'm not saying I support all of Dave Chappelle's choices morally or the things he talks about that I think are moral or whatever, but it seems to me that people who don't choose to live under that sort of cultural pressure and conform to the idea that they say is good, this is what's good, or this is what you should accept.
Right.
Those are the people that seem to break under that. Whereas the people who are like, look, man, I'm this person,
Partially because
weird.
those types of people, Dave Chappelle, Robin Williams, those type of people have a particular branding that they've developed in their comedy. But it used to be culturally that if you were a comedian, you could get away with a lot more than what would normally be socially acceptable.
Right.
But even now, we see that starting to change and become more and more difficult for comedians that work the circuit to be able to survive.
And comedy has sort of played a hugely important role in like keeping the culture accountable to like hypocrisy. So I think Dave Chappelle in that regard does like a good service to the culture. Like, this side says this side says this, and you're both crazy for these reasons. Like,
Right.
you know, like comedy can do a good job of keeping the culture accountable and level-headed, you know, because it is hyperbolic by nature, and like this is where that leads to. In a lot of cases, it's true and stuff. But yeah, it's just it's interesting.
I would say that part of the difficulty as well is that there have been stand-up comedians that started out in stand-up, and then they've worked into different things. And as they work into those different things, like I would say, let's take, for example, talk show hosts.
Mm-hmm.
So Jay Leno, pretty neutral. But Fallon tends to lean to the
Fallon
left.
or Kimmel or both?
Well,
Kimmel for sure.
Kimmel for sure. Kimmel for sure. And so what
I
happens?
would guess Jimmy
Well,
Fallon
what
as well.
happens there is that they tend to have dictated to them by the networks what is going to be allowable or not allowable, because the networks are concerned about the market share
You know what's
in the
interesting?
viewership.
You know what's interesting about Jimmy Kimmel though, since he was brought up, is he talked about this Dr. Seuss thing in his monologue,
Yeah.
and he was like saying that this is ridiculous.
Well, it is
you know?
ridiculous.
And he did a whole thing about, okay, the next Dr. Seuss book will be called "No Green Eggs and Ham" because that offends vegans. You know, it offends vegans to have a book called Green Eggs and Ham. And so on and so forth. He did a whole.
I just cringed at the thought of having to eat green eggs.
He did a whole thing about
Ugh.
all these different books and rebranded them and retitled them to be non-offensive.
Yeah.
And he said, like, and he was joking about it, and he obviously didn't support our last president, but he's like, this is the kind of thing that gets your next Donald Trump elected, because you guys are taking this too far. Like, you're not doing your jobs as parents, you know? This is a caricature. It's not meant to represent. If I went to Hawaii, okay? I'm not an artist by any means. I'm a stick figure kind of guy. But if I draw or illustrate a book, and I'm talking about my experience in Hawaii, okay?
Right.
And I draw some Hawaiians in my book with board shorts and a tank top, because I saw a lot of them with
Right.
board shorts and a tank top.
That's correct.
Am I discriminatory?
Well,
Not. I mean, that's a good question, right? Like, is that book gonna make it, or is it gonna be pulled? Like, it's ridiculous.
did you put a lei in their hair?
No, I didn't put a lei in their
Or
hair.
the flower in their hair?
No, but it's crazy. Like,
I think
But-
these people have too much time on their hands, personally.
it goes back to that, huh?
Yeah.
Maybe. It looks like we have some good discussion on the on the comment
Okay,
section
well,
between
yeah, let's
some
do it at
people.
the comment section.
Well, it goes back a long way, but it has to do with, you know, the right to pull the books, what the pulling of the books implies, if it's a market issue or if it's a censorship issue. But that's the long and short of it. There's some back and forth going on. Is it a burning books issue?
Not there yet.
Yeah.
Can't burn them if you can't get a hold of them.
Joe says that the latest comment here, he's talking to Josh. I think it's a small implication. It's a shrewd move in a changing market. Probably did more to protect the brand moving forward. And then Josh must have responded to me. Why does Moana have thicker legs and dark skin? That's discriminatory. He's being whatever.
being
but-
facetious. You can pick on anything you want to and make an issue of it.
Mhm. It's true. We're out of time. Our hour's up.
Well, it's been entertaining.
I hope it's been entertaining. I hope it gives people food for thought. And yeah, tune in next time. There's some question marks about when next time will be because of spring break, and our co-host will be gone, and maybe I just host it by myself, and I just sit here and talk to myself.
There you go.
And I'll switch seats and talk to myself. And I'll
Yeah,
switch back. But anyways, thanks for tuning in. Hope it's useful to you, and stay tuned for the next episode. So, bye. Aloha.
The views presented in this program are not meant to express the specific views of the Lafayette Bible Fellowship. You are listening to the Vigilance Radio.